All right. So, in terms of um, the inspiration, I thought I would start by sharing a little bit about my journey that got me to the principles, because I think it is all relevant in terms of the transformation that occurred within me when I was impacted by this understanding. And so, really, I wasn't interested growing up in terms of anything. Oh, I'm just going to mute. Oh, I don't know where that's coming from. I wasn't interested in anything sort of a spiritual nature. I didn't really think about things like that. And until I was in my second year of college, it was just not really on my mind. And then what happened in my second year of college is that I was in a car accident. I wasn't hurt seriously, but it really shook me up and had a really profound impact in terms of my internal foundation of feeling safe and secure in the world. And so what happened is that I just fell into this really difficult depression. I never really experienced anything like that before in my life. And, I felt suicidal. I just really felt like I couldn't function. I wasn't able to do any of my classes. I ended up having to sort of not even do my exams at the end of the year because I was having such a hard time. And it scared me. It really scared me that that was something that could happen, and I didn't understand it at the time. And so I sort of started down a traditional path of psychotherapy and psychiatry, and none of it really made a big difference. And then, sort of to add on something, I started my graduate work and I did research in Guatemala. And while I was doing research there, I got parasites, and I got really sick with parasites. And when I came back to Canada, that's where I was doing my graduate work at the time. I went to see the doctor, and they were telling me that the tests were coming back and that there was nothing wrong with me and that I was fine. And I knew, I could feel in my body that I really wasn't fine. And it actually was probably, gosh, I don't know how many years later, I think 30 years later, when I finally was able to get rid of these parasites. Maybe it was 20 years later. It was a long time afterwards when I finally got rid of them. But at the time, what I did was I started to see a naturopath, and she introduced me to holistic health and a whole different way of looking at the body. But she also introduced me to yoga and meditation at the time. And it was really helpful. It was something that I was, quite impacted by. But what I see now is that even though it was helpful and I was impacted by it, I was coming at the understanding from a place of trying to fix myself. And so my ego co-opted sort of my spiritual exploration and saw, oh, here's a great way to get more driven and to really apply effort and hard work in a way that seems like it's a good idea. And so even though, definitely experienced a more settled mind, the motivation behind it was still one of fear. And so I would, get up at 4:30 in the morning and, practice 2.5 hours of yoga, meditation in a community. And there were very many beautiful things about that. But it was still coming from a place of insecurity inside of myself. But I didn't see that at the time. And so all of the things that I've tried and have done after that point, because it just opened up this vista of there's more than meets the eye, and I could feel something calling me forward. But it was being driven by that place of perfectionism inside of myself, a place of not feeling good enough, a place of insecurity. And so there's that kind of mixed bag with it. And so as things sort of unfolded, I met Angus. He's a much more mellow guy. Getting up at 4:30 in the morning and doing 2.5 hours of yoga meditation was not his cup of tea. So I kind of sort of shifted out of that and just, but still kept sort of looking at various things. I did a master's degree in spiritual psychology and became a therapist. And so all of this was looking in a direction that was pointing towards the authentic self, our true nature. And I was getting tastes of that, and the tastes of that were really wonderful. But the whole time, I wasn't seeing how I was relating to my thinking. I did know that my feelings came from my thoughts, but I thought that meant I had to fix my thinking so that I could have a better feeling experience. I thought that my work was to eliminate my insecure thoughts so that I could experience more of my true nature. And so that was the way that I was going about it. And that was kind of where I was at when I came across the understanding of the principles. It was like, oh, here's an even better way for me to fix myself and to fix my thinking. Here's something that seems like it's going to really, really be different. And why I thought that was because I could feel something inside of me when I was listening to the people sharing the understanding. I didn't really, especially at the beginning, I really did not understand what was being shared. And I would notice that I would be feeling a lot better after listening, but I couldn't put my finger on why I felt better, what was happening to me. But I knew that I was feeling better. And why I wasn't understanding, part of why I wasn't understanding at the time is that the way that I was listening was through everything that I already knew. So I was listening, fitting it in with what I already understood, rather than really listening and hearing something different, hearing something fresh. And so because I was listening with that kind of filter, I wasn't really hearing anything new, which isn't surprising, but yet I was still getting impacted, and I was getting impacted in a way that was really, continuing for me to look in this direction and to seek out more. And so as I kept looking in this direction, kept staying in the conversation, kept listening to various teachers and people that were sharing the understanding, I came across the work of the Pranskys, George and Linda Pransky, and I had the opportunity to go and do an intensive with Linda Pransky and one of her mentees at the time, Lula Turner. And when I had the intensive, and I know that some of you probably heard this story, but it was really my defining moment in the principles. And what I mean by a defining moment, it was when I saw something new and fresh and different that was something that I hadn't ever heard before. And I know that it was coming from inside of me, that new fresh thinking was coming from inside of me, but it was absolutely facilitated by the conversation I was having with Linda Pransky. And there was something about her level of grounding in the understanding, her level of presence and clarity that really shook the conceptual way I was seeing the understanding, and shook it in such a way that the cracks were able to get big enough for me to look beyond what I already thought I knew to seeing something different. And the content of what I saw is not really what's important, although I'll share it. But what's most valuable, I think, is recognizing for all of us that is how transformation and healing happens for each one of us. It is by seeing something new, by seeing something fresh, seeing something that we haven't seen before, that comes out of the blue. We can't manufacture it from our intellect. We can't manufacture it from revisiting what we already know. It comes in when we let that go and actually allow what else there is to reveal itself to us. And so in that meeting, what really fell into place for me was how I could be with my humanity, be with my humanness in a much more kind and accepting way. So that was the implication of what I saw. And what I saw was that how I was engaging with my thinking, my insecure thinking at the time, was what was bringing it to life. And that my resistance to my feelings of insecurity, my wanting to change how I felt, was because I was using my experience to define myself as having something wrong with me. I was seeing that having those feelings meant that I was broken, that I needed to be fixed. And so all of that time I had spent trying to fix myself in various different ways, psychologically, spiritually, all these kinds of things, I kind of just saw it for what it was. It's like, oh my goodness, I have been putting so much effort into this and nothing's broken. Absolutely nothing is wrong with me. And I saw that because I understood more clearly the role of thought. And I got less interested in what the content of my thinking was and how that content would mean anything. And I saw more how thought plays out in my life, how it is just this energy that has content in it, that is constantly coming through my stream of consciousness, constantly flowing, constantly moving. And I bring awareness to it and bring that to life. And that when I'm suffering, that's my participation in this neutral energy. And neutral not meaning nothing. Like I have a whole different relationship with the word neutral as well now, because to me, neutral was boring. Neutral was like, oh, that's not good. But now for me, neutral is not a negative. There's a quality of peace and quietness in it that just allows me to feel a depth and richness that I didn't feel before, because I was so caught up in the drama of my emotional roller coaster and was spending so much time focusing on that. Thinking, with good intentions, thinking that that's what I needed to be doing, because if I could fix the human emotional roller coaster, then I would be a better person and I would have a better human experience. And it was the complete opposite of that helped me. So being able to see that the roller coaster doesn't need to change, or at least I don't need to change the roller coaster of my emotional ups and downs, but that as I see more clearly how that system works of my emotional experience, I take all of that less seriously. And in my taking that less seriously, I allow myself to have a more graceful experience as I go through the ups and downs of my human journey. And so for me, that was such freedom. That was exactly what I needed to hear at the time. And I think that we all get the insights that are our insights. And so for somebody else, it's like, well, yeah, that's obvious. But for me, that really changed my life. It changed my life in terms of how I showed up as in my work. Because at the time I was, leading a behavioral health company, part of a leadership team, and I was really feeling burnt out. And that was why I had started this whole journey of looking at coaching and learning more about it. And that's how I came across the understanding of the principles. But what I saw was that my burnout was not coming from what I was doing. It was not coming from the difficulties the company was having. It was not coming from the sort of the crisis nature of the work. It was coming from how I was relating to my thinking at the time. It was coming from me pushing myself, being driven by my insecure thoughts and trying to cope with them by pushing myself and buying into all of my perfectionistic thinking. So that is what was causing me to feel burnt out. And when I saw that, what it allowed me to do was have more choice of not having that thinking drive my behavior. I was able to see it more for what it was, which was just fear-based thought, and see it as feedback to let me know that I was stirred up and that I didn't need to take that thinking seriously, whereas I had been taking it very seriously in the past. And so as I stopped taking that thinking seriously, I became more grounded in a different kind of knowing that I would get glimpses of before. But that became more of the normal in terms of how I was navigating life, from a nicer feeling place inside of myself, and having my behaviors be coming from that place inside of me rather than the urgent, fear-based, driven, insecure thinking that had really been running me for much of my life. And, you know, it's actually surprising that I didn't fall apart a lot sooner. So as that shifted in my work, I also, you know, I wasn't really noticing it as much, but it also really shifted in how I was showing up in my relationships. And so one of the big shifts that happened was in my relationship with Angus, where I had been, prior to seeing what I saw, very sensitive in our relationship. And I would spend a lot of time not just trying to fix myself, but also trying to fix my relationship and also trying to fix Angus, which he was never very grateful for. But what I started to see was that my upset was not about him. It was not about something being wrong with my marriage. It was a temporary experience that would happen when I would get reactive thinking. And in the past, that reactive thinking, I would have thought meant something about our relationship. And so I would start looking at it and analyzing it and finding more evidence to kind of build my story as to what the problem was. And so it would, whatever it was that started my reactivity in terms of my thinking, as I engaged with it, as I breathed life into it, that became more and more what I would see. And then it would look like there was a real problem and something really needed to be fixed. And I don't know how I can even be married to this person. And so when I started to get an understanding of reactive thinking and to be able to see that I don't have to engage with it, I don't have to bring it to life, I don't even have to look at it, I can actually ignore it and pay attention to other things. What happened was my marriage started to look completely differently. And I know that this happened to me, but it's also happened to many of the clients that Angus and I've worked with, where, you know, he started to look really different, started to look like he was different. But really all that had happened was that I was no longer feeling so destabilized in my relationship with him. And because I wasn't living so much in my reactive thinking and seeing him through the lens of my reactive thinking, I was just seeing him more from a neutral place. And from that more neutral place, I was just able to recognize what an amazing human being he is and how much I loved him. And even though I'm not perfect and he's not perfect, the things that, you know, might not be my preference weren't deal breakers anymore. And they were deal breakers before. Like, they really were, in my mind, they felt like they were things that I just couldn't live with. And then I'd forget about them until I was reminded about them. But once I started to see that if something was looking like a deal breaker to me, that was a reflection of my thinking, not meaning anything about my marriage or meaning anything about Angus. It gave a whole different foundation. And so I became much less reactive in our relationship. I became much less sensitive to his sort of humanness and his emotional ups and downs, whereas previously I would have taken them very personally, and I would have really thought, well, I can't tolerate his humanness. That's got to change. So it was, you know, so liberating to see that not only could I accept my humanness more, but I could be with other people's humanness more. And it wasn't always a less reactive experience, because I definitely became much less reactive with Angus. But there was a couple of times, especially with my eldest daughter, she's an older teen now, but she was just kind of hitting her teen years, where I got reactive in a way that I had never expected I would get reactive with my daughter. Like, that was just not me. But even in that, even in my humanness in that experience, you know, something that I wasn't proud of, something that was not in my mind getting it right, even in that, the understanding was helpful to me to be able to see that that's what happens when I get caught up in my thinking. That's what happens when I lose my bearings. But I don't need to keep that running in terms of my self-judgment and my self-criticism and create something much bigger than what happened. And this allowed me to stabilize much more quickly and then be able to reconnect and to have an honest, real conversation with her. And what I was able to see from that was not only my ability to come back from being destabilized, but I was able to see her resilience and to recognize that that was something that I couldn't take away from her, no matter what I did, that she has that resilience inside of her. And that the authenticity and the intimacy of being able to work through that was so much richer than what I had been doing previously, which was to really not be as authentic with her, because I wanted to present as a good mom. I wanted to always be good. I wanted to always get it right. I never wanted to step out of line. But in that containment of myself, I wasn't showing up as honestly and as authentically as I could have, with a level of intimacy that I really wanted to have with her. And so it was really amazing to see that the warts and all of my humanness actually brought us closer together and actually helped to forge a deeper connection of understanding with us that I just did not think was, I did not think that that was going to happen. I really thought that if I made a mistake, that that would damage her. And now I can see that, you know, me doing the best that I can and being as authentic as I can is really what's needed in relationships. And if I make a mistake, if I step out of line, if I cross, you know, if I screw up, that's part of my learning, but it's also part of the learning for everybody concerned in that. And so just taking the pressure off, that's what this understanding has done for me. And it has gave me a feeling of much greater inner freedom that I said has, you know, really touched all areas of my life, whether it be personal, whether it be professional. And in the professional side, it's like, not only did I fall in love with the job that I was doing even more, but because at the time I was totally resistant to it and, you know, trying to figure my way to get out of it. But I fell in love with it again. But in that process, it just naturally revealed to me about 18 months later what my next step was. And it was the perfect timing to leave the company. We were just getting ready to sell at that point, which had been our goal all along, was to get it back into a strong enough place so that it could be sold to another company. And we'd met that place, and it was the perfect time for me to step away because it would have been in the best interest of the company at that point. And I was able to step into being a solopreneur and really looking at how I wanted to share this understanding in the world and really have this be the work that I wanted to do, and have that come to fruition. And I never imagined that, you know, all of the things that I'm doing now, like I never realized that I could work with companies. I never realized that I could work with groups. I didn't think that there would be, you know, something like the Soul-Centered series coming to me as an idea to bring to fruition. And so it just allowed me to take the limits off of myself, not through, you know, reframing my limits, but just really getting much better at being in the unknown and just following what the next step was in front of me and being willing to take it without second guessing it or making it a big story about it, and just taking that simple next step and taking that next step and seeing where it took me and being willing to try ideas out, being willing for things not to work out, being willing to step into new territory. And as George Prensky would say, get in over my head and really allow myself the experiential opportunity of seeing what happens when that formless energy of thought comes in a fresh way without me trying to control it, trying to make it go in a certain direction, but just really being open to see what wants to be expressed and to come through. And so really that is where the idea for this program came from. And part of what was really important to me was to give other people the opportunity to spend time in a journey that was not just a one-off weekend, but really to have time to really steep in this understanding and to be able to learn from some of the original students of Sydney Banks. Not because Sydney Banks, Kathy Casey was on the webinar on Saturday, and she was saying, when she heard about Sydney Banks, she'd been doing the principles, teaching it, and hadn't even heard about Sydney Banks. And when she heard about him, she's like, who's this guy? Is he some guru? I'm not into a guru. So it's like I didn't want to put Sydney Banks out there as a guru, but I did want to really point to the source of where these teachers were coming from and have it come back to the real simplicity of how he shared the understanding, and give people the opportunity to learn from teachers that learn directly from him and who have been students of this as well as teachers of this for 35, 40 years, and who have just a depth in their grounding that is so impactful. And I feel it every time I have the opportunity to either work with them, be mentored by them, or listen to them. And it just made sense to me to have their wisdom that points all of us in the direction of our wisdom, to have them be able to have a format and a platform to share this, and to be able to keep a continuity over those 6 months with the webinars of people that are all very close to my heart, that have all impacted me, and that I can really speak to their capacity to share this understanding. And also for me to participate in it as a through line between the weekends, between the webinars, and show up for all of the participants every week in a way that allows people to integrate, understand, ask questions, and be mentored in whatever way is appropriate and unique to them. And so it just felt like I was creating a loving container for whoever wants to join in and be on that exploration and be looking in that direction, and to have all of us drop into a deeper understanding in an experiential way of knowing who we are. And for me, the ripple effects for the planet, for the globe, for our communities, I can't imagine what the ripple effects of that are going to be. But I know there are going to be ripple effects. And I know that there are many programs out there. I love that there's such diversity and richness in this community, and that everybody can find what really they're drawn to and what really fits for them. And so in terms of, why I wanted to do this program, that's where it's coming from. And why now is because I got the idea and started acting on it. And this was the time that came forward that I could put it all into place. But it's really coming from a very heartfelt place inside of myself. And I can, even in the webinars that we're doing, to just introduce people to the teachers and give everybody the opportunity to have the experience of listening to them speak and potentially ask questions. I can really feel the authenticity and the groundedness in what they're sharing in those webinars. And I feel that impact is felt by those who participate. And so that's my introduction to, why the understanding of the principles is so important to me. It's just profoundly impacted every area of my life. It has humbled me. It has helped me to take myself so much less seriously. It's allowed me to be much more lighthearted. And it has really freed me up to be of service in a much more easy way than I was trying to do it before. And I also think that the people that are participating in the program are all extremely impactful in the way they share this understanding. And that's, why I reached out to them to ask them to participate in it. And so I'll just open it up now for questions. And I've got to remember, okay, so if you click on the participants tab, then you'll see on the right-hand side, there's a button that will allow you to raise your hand. So if anybody has a question, really now, this is the time to ask it. I'm here in service to you. And once you raise your hand, I will be able to see that you've raised your hand, and then I'll be able to unmute you because I know everybody is muted at this time. So it's wonderful to have all of you on the call. I'm just seeing all of your names. It's great to see you and be with you and spend this time with you. And I'm not seeing any questions yet. And I know that there's some people that are participating in the program on the call, it looks like. So if anybody wants to share. Oh, here, I see a raised hand. Here we go. Hang on. Sue.
Hi, Hannah. Sorry, I've just sneezed. Just a couple of things.
Yes.
Yeah, the program. Obviously, it's in Florida, California.
It's in Santa Monica.
Right. So, I haven't got the capability of getting there just yet. Is it going to be live on Zoom in any way? Can people participate in Zoom?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sue. And I have been having a number of people asking me about that. And so when I originally set up the program, I really wanted to sort of keep the cost down to a minimum. And so that's sort of where I was able to set the price point where it's at. And so I didn't factor live streaming into that equation. But it is being looked into. I can't say that it's going to be able to be feasible given how it is set up. But given the number of questions that I've had about it, it is being researched. Angus is helping me look into that. But I will say, even if we can't figure out the live streaming within the budget, it is all being recorded. And so we will find a way to make this available to people, even if it's not done live at the time. So that is
fantastic.
Yeah, so that is definitely happening, and that's confirmed. The live stream option, I can't answer that, but I will definitely keep people posted if anything changes on that front.
Fabulous. Thank you, sweetheart.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks so much. Take care, Sue. Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
Hello.
Sure.
It's me.
Oh, hang on. Who's that?
Hey.
Hi.
Yeah, I just think it's an amazing program that you're doing, and I would absolutely love to be on it, but actually I'm already overcommitted because I'm mentoring on another group for this next year. So yeah, but I would love if you put it out for sale afterwards, or if you run it again, I would absolutely love to be part of it. So
and I've
enjoyed the calls so far. They've been fabulous. So yeah.
Thank you, Bertie. Yeah. Thanks for letting me know. And I'll definitely, we'll see how this one goes. And, my feeling is if they're interested in doing it again, I'll certainly be up for that.
Yeah, because I've seen the value of it, and I've been on retreat with Chip and Jan, and that was awesome. It really was. So I saw the value. It's so important, I think, to be able to spend time with the original teachers. So, yeah.
Well, that's beautiful. Well, thank you, Bertie.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care. I see Dror, you've got your hand raised. Let me unmute you, Dror. Hi, Dror.
Yeah, hi. Well, first, I'm getting very excited about the program. I mean, the webinar has been great so far, and can't wait to really experience the program itself. My question is, in between the live weekends, besides the online webinars, what else would we do? Would there be any other tasks or homework or things to do, throughout the month?
Well, there's not going to be assigned homework as part of it. There's really going to be a lot of opportunities to stay in the feeling and stay in the connection, whether that's through, there's going to be a secret Facebook group that everybody can stay connected in that way. There'll be the weekly office hours that I do, which will be another way to stay in the conversation. And there's many, many 3 Principles resources out there. So people will be encouraged, if they want to explore it. But it's a program that's really pointing everybody to that we have everything we need inside of ourselves. So it's not about doing more, giving ourselves more assignments. It's really about dropping into the experience of knowing that we are enough and staying in the conversation in whatever way feels fun, enjoyable, and meaningful to us. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So we will get some additional resources, but it will be like an optional thing to do.
Yeah, the webinars are all going to be live, but they'll be recorded. The office hours will be live, but also recorded. And if people want pointing in the direction of other resources, happy to share that, but they're not required.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dror. Oh, Angus has a question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It wasn't so much a question as maybe an opportunity to get more clarification, because I'm not sure what everybody knows what office hours are. And I know that I've spoken to people in the past with trainings that you've done, and they've waxed lyrical about office hours. So I thought that might be a good thing to maybe talk a little bit more about.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, I have to say, Barb Patterson and I do a Solopreneur Mastermind, and I think we've done 5 now. And part of that process was a weekly office hours for the group. And I have to say, it was one of my favorite parts of the mastermind. And so that's why I really wanted to do that for this group as well. And so what it is I set time aside on the calendar to show up on a Zoom call like this, and whoever wants to show up, shows up. It's not mandatory, but whoever feels called to. And it's an opportunity to ask questions, to get mentoring, to have coaching, or simply to share what you're seeing. And it's just a really organic, lovely space to spend time in the feeling and to spend time looking in this direction. And it's just, we all show up as we are. Whatever's present is present. And it's just, for me, it keeps the connection going in a really beautiful way. And again, it's not mandatory, it's not required, but it's just something that is a way to just be in the feeling if you feel called to, and have it be
Rohini,
you in whatever way. Yes, hi, Ellen.
It's Ellen. Yeah. So I wanted to say something about that, because I participated in one of those mastermind groups, and I was blown away at what occurred for me during the office hours. Maybe it was just because I wasn't expecting anything. Who knows? But I had some of my most powerful insights from the sharing in the office hours. So I just want to say it's to me, it's a hidden gem of your program.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you. Appreciate you sharing that. I do have a question here. Let's see. It's on the chat. Best place to get the details about hours and location. And will it be interactive? Okay, so I'm going to type out for everybody in the group the website information so that everybody has that. And then in terms of, okay, there we go. And in terms of whether it's interactive, I would say it's experiential, and each weekend is really going to be aligned with how we come together organically in that weekend and what is really present in the room. So that's a very much here and now experiential learning process. And it will absolutely be interactive in terms of opportunity for people to ask their questions And each teacher has a slightly different way that they like to share the understanding. So some of the teachers really like to include demos as part of that. So that might be part of what happens on a weekend. Some of the teachers really don't like doing that at all and really want to have it just be a conversational exploration where people bring their questions and we have a conversation together. I do like to have the opportunity for the group to connect. And so there will be ways throughout the time that there will be interaction in that way where it's the group connecting with each other. So that's sort of the flavor of the interactivity. But I want to point out that the principles is really about looking in the direction of who we are and having an understanding of that that allows us to navigate our human experience more gracefully and with more ease. And so it's not going to be a program that is about working our psychological process. It's going to be a program looking towards our spiritual nature, and from what we see, looking in that direction, we'll have greater perspective on our human experience and have insights related to that that are really wake us up more fully. And it's really showing us more clearly the illusion that our thinking creates and being able to see thought more and more as the illusion it is, rather than taking it so seriously. Because previously, I didn't see my thinking as illusion. So I would spend a lot of time engaging with it and digging into it and looking at it and having an emotional experience that reflected that, thinking that that was going to help me to connect more with my true nature. But what I see now is that seeing it for what it is what helps me wake up. And I think that's what the understanding of the principles does in such an elegant way, is to help all of us wake up to the role thought plays in our life. And in seeing that more clearly, we just naturally drop into a deeper experience of the fullness of who we are, that includes our human experience, but is much bigger than that, and brings us a deeper experience of the formless nature of who we are, that can't be put into words, that can't be taught in any kind of content way, but we know it when we feel it. And I think that is what we all experience day to day, but we miss it at times. We don't really see that it's happening. And so the understanding really helps to navigate the human map of our psychology in a way that has it shrink down to size and become more manageable, so that we have a bigger experience of what's behind our human psychology. And our behaviors are driven more from that place than from the place of our intellect. So I hope that answers that question. And if you have any other questions, please just raise your hand about that if I didn't answer it properly. Let's see. Any other questions? And then in terms of the program, if people are interested in doing it, I do want to let you know that there is an early bird price that is available until tomorrow night. So until Tuesday. So if you want to get in and you want to get that early bird price, then you would need to sign up by Tuesday, I think midnight Pacific. It changes. It's like a pumpkin with Cinderella. It changes after midnight. And if I know there's a lot of people on the call, there's not necessarily a lot of questions on this call. So if anybody has a question that you would just like to speak with me directly, you don't want to ask it in this format, then I'm happy to have a conversation with you. And I'll just put my email here so that if people want to reach out, how do I do that here? If people want to reach out to me personally, I'm happy to have a conversation with you about it. Oops. Okay. But we still have a little bit of time. And if anybody has any other questions that aren't related to the program, but just is on your mind that you would like to ask now, it'd be fine to raise your hand and ask that as well. And if there isn't anything, I'm happy to bring the meeting to a close. So I'll just give you guys a little moment in case there's any shy people. I totally relate to being a shy person and not wanting to raise my hand and then afterwards going, oh, I wish I had. So I'm going to give anyone that's in that situation more. Oh, here we go, Richard. Not that you're a shy person. I don't know.
You're teasing me.
Hi, Richard.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
For those of you that don't know me, my wife and I met Sid in 1976. So we've been around this for a long time, shortly after Sid actually had, 3 years after Sid had his experience. Stumbled across it. Didn't know I was searching. When we had the insights that we had, they came together. We read a book together, and it seems so much simpler than the pathways into it now, in terms of there's probably more opportunities now than there was in the very early years. But there's something to be said about the simplicity of the early years. And I caught on about Angus mentioning office hours, and I'm not quite sure exactly what that means. And then I just think of Sid's comment about the illusionary nature of space, time, and matter. Well, time is mentioned in the illusion. And, when you're in the zone, and I guess to cite Michael Jordan, the basketball player, and my son and I have had this conversation because he'd asked me questions about, well, how do you know? How do you do this? And Michael Jordan would just simply say, well, you're in the zone, you're in the zone. It just comes so naturally to you when you're in the zone. And living life that way, we were built that way. I didn't realize that until I had my aha moment, was 2 words, I'm okay. But it came as a result of being around the essence of what Sid was sharing. And it was really simple. He was just sharing the experience he had. And in the process of allowing that essence to, ripple out from him through sharing, and that was another bit of sage advice that he always asked us to do, was share what you know. You don't share what you know, you tend to say you don't know. And it's not a question of I know, arrogantly, intellectually, whatever. And I can recall at times we used to meet weekly at the Cedar Beach resort, and he would speak, and then he'd just simply say, it's kind of like, your turn. Now share with each other. And if he noticed anybody, and that included me, that might be standing at the side of the room and being a little bit insecure still, he'd come over and say, well, how you doing? And just simply engage you in this very calm, gentle way. And then he'd actually give you a little poke almost in a kind of a fun, spiritual way and say, why don't you go talk to that person over there? And it was just a nudge to wake people up, to bring them alive, to encourage them to experience what was innately theirs, their birthright. Elsie uses the word birthright. That's something I didn't know until I had my aha, and then I realized it, but it was that simple. And I went from top of my class in building technology, top of academic technical in high school, no problems, no homework, nothing. But at work, I would count to 10 before I'd call the building department to talk details about something. I had no reason to do that. I frequently never made the call because I never made it to 10. I'd start counting over again. When I had the aha moment, I stopped counting. I just simply picked up the phone. So there's a really cool engagement factor that comes with the waking up, that you just really don't question whether or not you can do it anymore. You just do it. And what comes out is 99.9% on the money. When it's coming from essence, it's there.
Yeah. That's beautiful, Richard. And I think that you're really pointing all of us in the direction of that simplicity of what's already there. And being in a conversation that is pointing in that direction, it just helps us to have those ahas like you had, and helps us to see it. And there's something about the group energy, being in conversation in that way, that just, for me, allows me to drop in and to see more. And that's why I just love staying in the conversation.
I think it's a wonderful thing that you're facilitating. I mean, there was in the Bible where Jesus said, "Gather in my name." So gather in the spiritual essence. Wow, amazing things happen when that happens.
Thank you. And it's so wonderful to have you on the call, have you, been sharing and being in this understanding for so long, and meeting Sid at that time on the island. It's, what a rich resource you are in terms of that experience. So I look forward to you sharing more and hearing more about that, whether it's on the Facebook page or in other places.
We got challenged.
We're human, right?
Well, I helped Sid design-wise and publishing-wise for The Missing Link and Second Chance and The Quest of the Pearl. I mean, that's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And it came back from a reviewer, and Marika and I looked at the comments and the suggestions, and we went, I don't think this is what Sid really is intending here. So we called him up and talked to him. And he says, well, just. He's like, okay. Oh, it's just like, if that didn't challenge you to the core.
But you did know. He was right.
Well, I started helping him with a metaphysical statement, because he was sharing with quantum physicists, and he was so hopeful that some scientific principle-based statement could be introduced that would describe the core essence of the principle. So I was into something else with another client, which was founded on Einstein's E = mc squared, and we took that model and applied mind, consciousness, and thought to it, but introduced nothing new that Sid wasn't sharing. So one of the attributes was infinity. The principles are infinite.
Mm-hmm.
Every attribute of the principles are infinite. So that was one of the symbols that fit into the statement. And so he was intrigued. So I had about a 2.5-page sort of brain dump, if you want to call it. We're just sort of rationalizing it. So I sent it over to him. He says, well, can you reduce it down to half a page? And so I did that and sent it over to him. And this was after a conference in San Jose. And when we were on the final phone call of the quantum statement and all this stuff, I thanked him for San Jose. And I said, I knew from the moment I walked through the door that this was different. And he said, well, how do you know? And I said, in the 25 years that you and I have known each other, how many times have I called you and we've talked about the principles? And this week it's been 5 times. He just chuckled. That was all he needed to say. He's such a good friend.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. That's such a treat to have you share that, Richard. Really feel the depth of the relationship you had.
We are so fortunate that Sid had his experience that he did. Totally uncalled for, just out of the blue. I mean, that's, if anything, that's an insight that says it can happen to every one of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I love about how clear his teachings are, is that there's no difference. We all have that same knowing, wisdom inside of us. There's no hierarchy there. So thank you, Richard. And I know we're coming up to time. Really appreciate you sharing. So I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Is there anybody else that would like to say anything before we finish the call? Give me a moment. All right. Well, I've put my email and the website address is in the chat. So if you want to make a note of that, and if anybody would like to reach out to me personally with any other questions, I'm happy to speak with you. And there is a closed Facebook group called the Soul Centered Series Community. And if you're not a member of that group, you might want to join it. All of the free webinars that are being done with the weekend speakers are posted in that group. And there's just a wonderful growing community that is just blossoming beyond my wildest dreams there. And it's a beautiful space to connect and hear from other people. And I'm really struck by everybody sharing just the impact that the understanding has had on their lives. So it's a very uplifting space, and I'm very active on there. I read all of the posts and comment, and Angus makes beautiful images with quotes that are shared there as well. So it's all just a great way to remind us of what direction is really most supportive to be looking in. And I'm very grateful for everybody taking the time to be on the call today. And like I said, I want to remind everyone, if you do want to sign up and want the early bird, please sign up before tomorrow. I'm doing my best to make sure that that's clear for everybody. And I'm sending all of you love. Thanks so much for taking the time to be with me. And I'm going to unmute everybody so that we can all say goodbye to each other. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.